This is my seat.
The morning air at O'Hare International Airport in Chicago carried that familiar mix of jet fuel and hurried footsteps, the kind that reminded folks of cross-country commutes and family reunions delayed by layovers. Jonathan Brooks, a 52-year-old CEO of Summit Air Services, stood in line at the first-class boarding lane for Flight 512 to Dallas-Fort Worth. He had flown this route countless times, negotiating deals that kept his company soaring in the competitive airline industry. Today was no differenter, so he thought. But as he handed over his boarding pass, a subtle shift in the flight attendant's expression set off a chain of events that would expose cracks in the system he had helped build. Jonathan was a man who commanded respect in boardrooms, his deep voice carrying the weight of years spent climbing from modest beginnings in a Detroit suburb to the helm of a major airline. Dressed in a tailored gray suit, he exuded quiet authority, his silver-flecked hair neatly trimmed. Yet, when senior flight attendant Lisa Harlan glanced at his ticket seat, one Besh paused, her smile fading just enough to raise an eyebrow. "Sir, there seems to be a mix-up with this seat," she said, her tone polished but firm. "It's reserved for our priority guests. Could you please step to the side while I verify?" Behind her, a white businessman in his late 50s, Robert Kingsley, was already being ushered aboard with a glass of sparkling water in hand. Robert, a high-profile investor known for his connections in Wall Street circles, chatted amiably with the crew as if the plane were his personal lounge. Jonathan felt a familiar twinge, not anger, not yet but recognition. This wasn't his first encounter with unspoken assumptions. He could push back, demand an explanation right there at the gate, but he chose restraint. "Of course," he replied evenly, rolling his carry-on toward the economy section. As he settled into row 22, a narrow seat by the window, Jonathan's mind raced. Why him? Why now? He had built Summit Air from a regional carrier into a national player, yet here he was, relegated without reason. Little did he know, a young freelance reporter named Emily Grant, seated a few rows ahead, had caught the exchange on her phone. Emily, in her 30s with a keen eye for stories that simmered beneath the surface, sensed something off. She hit record discreetly, her instincts telling her this could be more than a simple glitch. The plane taxied down the runway, the engines humming like a distant storm. In first class, Robert reclined comfortably, sipping his drink and sharing laughs with a fellow passenger about golf courses in Texas. Back in economy, Jonathan pulled out his phone and tapped into a secure app protocol Sentinel, an internal safeguard he had designed for moments when the company's integrity was at stake. It wasn't for petty complaints, it was for principles violated. His thumb hovered over the confirm button. With a deep breath, he pressed it. Miles away at Summit Air's headquarters in Atlanta, analyst Ryan Patel's screen flashed red. He straightened in his chair, coffee forgotten. "Protocol Sentinel from the CEO himself," he muttered, pulling up the live feed from the boarding cameras. The footage was clear. Lisa taking the pass, her hesitation, Jonathan's redirection. No overbooking, no error, just a choice. Ryan forwarded it to Captain William Hayes, the pilot in command. On board, the seatbelt sign dinged off, and the cabin came alive with murmurs. Emily's first video clip was already uploading. "Man with first-class ticket sent to coach, no reason given." Comments flooded in almost immediately. "This happens too often. Is this what they mean by priority?" Jonathan glanced toward the curtain separating the classes, a thin barrier that felt like a chasm. He wondered how many others had faced this quietly, without recourse. Captain Hayes reviewed the clip in the cockpit, his jaw tightening. He had flown for Summit for over 20 years, priding himself on fairness. Toggling the intercom, he summoned Lisa to the galley. "Explain the seat change," he said, his voice low but unyielding. Lisa shifted uncomfortably. "It was a last-minute adjustment for a VIP. I thought it would avoid delays." Hayes shook his head. "No adjustment in the logs. Fix this now." Moments later, the captain emerged from the cockpit, his uniform crisp as he made his way to row 22. Passengers parted instinctively. "Mr. Brooks," he said, extending a hand. "Let's get you to your proper seat." Jonathan rose without fanfare, but the walk back to first class felt electric. Emily captured it all, her second video showing the reversal. Robert looked up, irritation flashing across his face as Jonathan settled into 1B. "What's this about?" Robert muttered, but no one answered. The flight leveled at cruising altitude, but the tension didn't ease. Emily's posts were gaining traction, retweets from civil rights advocates, shares from business bloggers. At headquarters, Ryan escalated the alert to the executive team, including the board chairwoman. Protocol Sentinel had triggered a full review, pulling in compliance and legal. FAA notifications were next. This wasn't staying internal. In the galley, junior flight attendant Maria Lopez approached Lisa. "That wasn't right," she whispered. Lisa waved her off, but her confidence was cracking. Jonathan, now in his seat, uploaded more details via his tablet. Timestamps, cabin snapshots. He thought of the young employees at Summit who looked up to him, proof that barriers could be broken. But what message did this send? That even at the top, some assumptions lingered? A bump of turbulence jolted the plane, mirroring the growing storm online. Emily refreshed her feed. Her videos had hit national news feeds. Captain intervenes after apparent bias on Summit Flight 512. Comments debated. Was it racism, classism, or just a mistake? Jonathan overheard Robert complaining to Lisa. "This disrupts the whole vibe up here." It took willpower not to respond, but Jonathan knew silence could be strategic. Captain Hayes addressed Lisa again in private. Your discretion crossed a line. We're reviewing this on landing. Lisa's face paled. I was just accommodating a key client. Hayes replied firmly. Accommodating one at the expense of another's dignity isn't policy, it's prejudice. As the plane began its descent into Dallas-Fort Worth, the cabin buzzed with whispers. Ground teams prepared, security at the gate, media vans outside. Jonathan's phone pinged with a message from the chairwoman. Full support. Proceed as needed. He steeled himself for what awaited. The wheels touched down with a thud, and the seatbelt sign blinked off. But deboarding wasn't routine. Security flanked the jet bridge as Jonathan stepped out first, cameras flashing like lightning. Reporters shouted, Mr. Brooks, was this discrimination? He paused at a makeshift podium, answering deliberately. It was a decision rooted in assumptions that have no place in our industry. We'll uncover why and ensure it never happens again. In a secured conference room at the terminal, the reckoning began. Lisa was escorted in, facing Jonathan, FAA observers, and HR. You knew who I was, Jonathan said calmly. Lisa nodded reluctantly. I thought you'd understand, keep it quiet. The room tensed. Quiet allows this to persist, Jonathan countered. For every CEO like me, there are passengers without a voice. The chairwoman joined via video. Recommendations? Jonathan outlined. Lisa's immediate suspension, a company-wide audit of seating practices, mandatory bias training. The FAA liaison nodded approval, warning of broader implications if ignored. Lisa left the room subdued, her career in limbo. Back at headquarters, pushback emerged. VP of Operations, Harold Vance, stormed into Jonathan's office the next day. This audit will cripple us crews afraid to make calls in emergencies. Jonathan stood firm. If fear of review stops bad decisions, that's progress. We're not freezing operations, we're thawing out inequities. The internal memo announcing reforms sparked debates in break rooms and emails. Some supported. Finally, accountability. Others resisted. This punishes good people for one slip. Jonathan met with Maria, praising her quiet courage. You'll help redesign our training, ensure voices like your shape policy. In a bold move, Jonathan held a press briefing inside a grounded Summit plane at Dallas-Fort Worth, seat 1B empty beside him. Crew, executives, and reporters filled the cabin. We acknowledge the harm, he began. This wasn't isolated data, shows patterns of unchecked discretion leading to bias. Slides revealed stats, disparities in reassignments, ignored complaints. He announced changes. No more solo discretionary moves, captain approval required, quarterly public reports, an independent equity board with FAA oversight. Maria was named to the training team. Ryan promoted to integrity director. Harold challenged publicly. This risks our efficiency. Jonathan responded. Efficiency without equity is failure. If top performers can't adapt, they're not top performers. The board backed him, offering resignation paths for dissenters. Media coverage exploded. CNN panels debated airline bias. Social media hashtags trended. Emily's full story linked it to everyday injustices, amplifying survivor testimonies. Months later, the reforms took hold. Audits exposed flaws. Training sessions sparked honest dialogues. Summit's reputation rebounded. Trust rebuilt through transparency. Jonathan reflected from his Atlanta office, watching planes take off. One seat had ignited change, proving dignity wasn't negotiable. In the end, Jonathan's stand didn't just restore his place, it elevated the entire industry. No loose ends, no ambiguities. Bias confronted, systems reformed, a company stronger for the storm. What do you think about the injustices we face in everyday life, like the ones in this story? Share your opinions in the comments below, especially on how we handle unfair treatment and stand up against it. Do you believe quiet resistance or public confrontation works best? Let me know your stance. I'd love to hear your views and spark a discussion.